So before I get started, I know I skimmed through this part for my excitement of what you were sharing, but I'm really happy and honored to be here. It's exciting to be able to share this space with other Gestalt therapists or people interested in Gestalt. I know we have about 45 minutes together, and I want to invite anybody who is here, if there's any questions, thoughts along the way, you don't have to wait until, I mean, I'll try to ask, I'll try to check in. Don't feel that you have to wait until then. If you have something to say or a thought that comes up, I would love this to be more of a dialogue than just a monologue. Those who know me know that I could talk for hours nonstop, but it doesn't mean it's going to be good for you. I could just talk for hours. And I want this to be a meaningful experience, hopefully, for all of us. Because I think that, I mean, the beauty of technology is that we can come together like this, miles and miles apart. And hopefully, if we're lucky, that could also have an experience of closeness. And I've been blessed to have those through a screen and surprised that they're possible. They're not a substitute for skin to skin contact, but it's a close second sometimes when we're able to be near people in a caring way. The topic of what I want to talk about, and it's really just a chat more than anything else. There's no PowerPoints or anything like that. It just takes away. It's something that has emerged from the working with trauma and addiction, from the trainings that I've been doing for the last few years, and being able to have opportunities to travel and be in places like with Carolina's school in Poland, and there's something that has organically become figure for me, which is this idea of a healing therapeutic relationship. And it's a little bit about what you were referenced to in terms of first this paradigm shift about understanding addiction and understanding trauma. I'll briefly talk about this just to give context. One of the important things that shifted the way I work with people is understanding addiction for its function, not its behaviors. So what is it doing for the individual? And even going all the way back to when it was a functional creative adjustment, when it was something in my life that allowed me to get through challenging situations. This does not equal a healthy choice, but it equals a choice that allows me to survive. And when we broaden that perspective of function versus symptom, I think we start to get to the essence of what relational Gestalt therapy is. That it's not about treating and mitigating symptoms. It's about connecting with the individual. And in that connectiveness, in that relationship, we're able to see the symptoms that are disruptive in our life, addiction, depression, anxiety, whatever it might be, and understand what function has it had in this individual's life, both in the present and in their story. And now that shift is so important, because instead of looking at somebody as a accumulation of symptoms that need to be treated, we could look at them as someone who has found creative ways of surviving and adapting to their reality. This beautiful concept, it's one of my favorite ones of Gestalt therapy, organismic self-regulation, right? It's such a beautiful concept that our organism is made to survive. That's the main role of our brain, to get us to survive. And in that surviving, we do these creative adjustments, these ways of getting through pain and discomfort when we don't have the resources and the support around us to help us manage it in a different way. We figure out ways of surviving with time, because we're seeing the now of the story. That's multiple iterations of it that has allowed me to survive and get through moments. So they could be maladaptive now. They could be severely dysfunctional in somebody's life now. And I prefer maladaptive than dysfunction, because maladaptive implies that it was adaptive at one point. and it has become maladaptive. So it's no longer serving the function that it once did when the options were limited. So that shift is so important because one of the things that I have realized through the years of working with people in my own therapy is that what we bring as therapists or coaches or support people to their relationship matters significantly. Not only does it matter, it's the only part of the therapeutic relationship that we have quote unquote control over, or at least some ability to manage, meaning how I'm showing up, what I'm choosing to focus, what I'm willing to take in from the other. I have a belief that the prerequisite for contact is vulnerability. So I have to be willing to let the other person in and for me to put some of my essence into this relationship. Without that, it's really hard to have meaningful contact with another. So when we think about what is the essence of a therapeutic relationship where a space of healing can emerge, it matters significantly what I put into that in between. I know I'm guessing most of you are familiar with Martin Buber, which is one of the cornerstones of Gestalt therapy in the I-id and I-thou relationships. And we love the I-thou idea in Gestalt, this we're both in it, I'm experiencing you and how you affect me matters and I bring it to the relationship. The I-id is kind of this more transactional, thought, relationship. The thing that sometimes we miss is that the I-id is important too, right? Buber never said just being I-thou all the time. It's just kind of like this idea that there's a deeper way of relating. And lately, I know Francessetti and Robal talk about this a lot, but there's this concept of understanding there's a third level of connectedness, which is that field that we co-create in between. And in that field that we co-create with the other, it's where what I bring into it matters significantly. So if I see the other as an addict who's misbehaving, who's a liar, who I cannot trust, who manipulates, and I need to get them to stop doing this behavior because if not, they're destructive, that's going to influence that in between. That's going to contaminate in some way the space that we co-create. If I see the other as someone who's hurting and has found a way of surviving that has become destructive in their life and is hurting them and their loved ones, well, what really matters, what I really need to pay attention to, it's the pain that they've been anesthetizing. And I can manage treating pain. I can make space for that pain to eventually be able to be welcome into this space. That changes the therapeutic space. It's a different way of being. So the basic premises of the talk today is that how I bring myself to the relationship and what I choose to focus on matters significantly because it's part of that in-between co-created space that we're in it and we are creating, and it's a part of us in any relationship. So I want to make a brief pause to see if there's any thoughts, comments so far that might be coming up for you. And I'm talking so fast that I'm not giving space for people to share.
Ja mam takie pytanie.
I have a question, Rafael.
Yes.
When we were participating in your training, you shared your personal stories a lot, such as those related to your migration. But I want to ask you, because I participated in the training for therapists, so I knew talk about bringing yourself into the therapist relationship. I'm interested in knowing, are you that authentic in your relationship with your clients? Do you share that piece of you with them as well? Do you use that part of yourself in that relationship?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, I mean, the short answer is yes, but I'll elaborate. I think that is part of one of the reasons I love Gestalt is this concept that our own self is one of the most efficient tools of therapy. And when I talk about vulnerability and that willingness to share parts of myself, it includes my story. It includes being willing to show my humanity to the other. I mean, of course, there's the basic rules that are important about self-disclosure, that if we do it for the benefit of the client, not for just the funness or sharing my story or saying, oh, I have one like this too. And second, that this is my own personal sense of it, that when we use parts of our story in the therapeutic relationship, it's better if it's something that I have worked through and have some sense of, and I'm not, overexposing something that I still don't have a good way of regulating. So when I do share parts of myself and parts of my story, there are pieces that I have worked through my own therapy, through my own healing. They have a clear sense of how they might be connecting to the other. That is once again the essence of that therapeutic relationship in space. That what I bring in my story, it's meaningful, and the challenges of adapting to a new land, the challenges of surviving wars, the challenges of my own family history of being in new territories. That is part of the story, and that's part of the connectiveness. One of the things that I have realized is that this is not, a great insight. You probably all have thought about this in some way, but it was a realization that for me, in my personal story, was very relieving, which is the fact that pain is an unavoidable human experience, and that it's the other side of the coin of joy. And if I'm willing to engage in joy, at one point I have to be willing to engage in pain, because that's part of human relationships. Loss, dissolution, people leave our lives, people pass away. There's moments where I have an expectation that doesn't come through, which doesn't mean that has to end relationships. It's part of the human experience. And the thing about pain is that it could be one of the most intimate human experience when we share our pain with someone else. It could be as intimate as romantic love. It's a whole different connection. But when I have someone that I feel safe enough that I could openly share my pain with, it's a unique human to human experience. And it's so powerful. And part of the challenge is being able to make space to include the other's pain in my story, in my space. That's where that awareness of my history, that awareness of my resiliency, and what I carry from all the generations in the past, it matters significantly, because there's a lot of gifts and opportunities that come from pain. The flip side of trauma in some ways is resiliency. And resiliency is something that comes when I'm able to have a space where pain has, talking about pain, I'm so sorry, I just saw a message come across. That Irving Polster just passed away. Wow.
O,
I know you were especially close to him, Rafael, and how meaningful that must be for you.
Yeah. I spoke with his wife yesterday, who told me that he was coming to an end. Might have been Thursday, I can't remember, but yeah, he is someone that I was lucky enough to know for the last 25 years, and I saw him a couple of weeks ago, and I was able to say goodbye, and so I just needed to make a pause and acknowledge that. Talking about pain, I guess Irv in his mastery showed up once more in my life. I mean, this is exactly the piece of human relationships, including pain. Because when you love someone, when you care about someone, you let them in your life, they will not be at one point, and that is the ultimate ending. But what makes it meaningful, it's the in between, that space that we had together, all the years that I got to know him, the wonderful conversation that will forever live in my life. But it doesn't take away from the pain. Human relationships include pain. The crazy thing is that if we don't relate to anybody, we will still experience pain. The only difference is that it's a shared space. It's a connected space. And that is the beauty of our work. It's the challenge and the beauty of our work. We are challenged to be in connection with some of the most complicated human experiences. We hear painful stories. We are with people who are an accumulation of their own stories and their own families and their own coming together. And there is this moment of connection that if we're lucky enough, it could be a spark for the possibility of healing to emerge. That is the essence of what we do. When you think about it, and at least for me, that is the most simplest way to understand why what we do is valuable. Because if we're lucky, we could create enough space for the other to explore and be able to allow pain, sadness, anger, whatever it might be, their story, to emerge in this space. And once we're able to grasp that painful experiences, when shared with an empathic, supportive, compassionate other, eventually pass. And they come to a close. And the pain ends. That is the essence of healing. To know that I could get through it and continue on in life. That's the spark of healing. It's not that the pain goes away and disappears. It's not that we erase the trauma. It's that we realize that we have the power to make space for human experiences and move on to the next human experience, which might be joy, might be sadness, might be falling in love, might be whatever it might be. But that capacity to be human is exponentially expanded in a space where I can be seen by somebody who's willing to show themselves. Does that resonate with people? Just want to check in and see if there's any thoughts.
tak, dzięki, Rafael. Bardzo mi przykro, tutaj też czytam na czacie wiele osób.
I'm sorry, Rafael. I'm reading in the chat box. Many people are sharing words of being with you, and
Yeah.
Receiving a message like that during the presentation. I want to ask you, do you need some sort of break? Do you need a moment to yourself, or do you just want to be with us here in this moment?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think being in this moment feels right. And so in the context of what we're talking about, I could share with you a little bit about Irving Polster that's meaningful. He was 99 when his last book was published. He was 100 when his last article was published. He's 101, had just submitted one more article for publishing that hasn't come out. I'm guessing it'll come up postmortem. When I talked to him last, he was working on an anthology of all his writings. He couldn't see very well. He had a hard time swallowing. He really was not very mobile. He had a really hard time walking. He could still move with a walker very slowly. He didn't hear very well. I mean, he could still hear you, but his hearing has been affected. So I asked him, what keeps you going? Why do you keep on writing and doing all this stuff? And he said, reason number one is that it's the one thing that I can still do that's meaningful. And it's something that has given me so much to be to this field of Gestalt therapy. And the second is, I still feel I have something to contribute. That is the essence of that connectiveness. Because that's something that I took from that moment with him, that despite the amount of pain and discomfort that he was in, there was something about humanity. There was something about talking about healing spaces that never stopped being meaningful for him. And one of the many lessons that I learned from him was the essence of how he truly loved life and people. Not that people might not be frustrating at times and challenging at times, and that there might not be difficulties in relationships, and we might not like every single human individually, but humanity as a whole is worth it. Despite all the horrible things that happen in the world, and the atrocities of wars and people having to leave their country because it's no longer safe, I don't think there's very few people who don't have migration in their family history. There's very few individuals who don't have a moment in their life where their ancestors had to leave a place because it was no longer safe. But despite the horrors of humanity, there's a vast and the greater part of human life. It's beautiful, it's loving, it's connecting, it's supporting, it's helping each other out. That's the greater, but it's not what they show in the news. You know, what they show in the news is the 5% that is shit. And it makes it feel like it's the whole. But the reality is that the 95% that doesn't make the news because it's not exciting, it's people trying to love and support each other in the best way they can. This is for me where this lives, where this healing space lives. And I'm forever grateful for Herb showing me that, but not in lectures, in embodiment, in the way he lived, in the way that he communicated, in the way that he engaged in relationships. So if we think about what we're talking about today, it makes it so meaningful for me that this happened now, because I get to be with you now, and we get to talk about it now, and we get to take a moment of including my pain in what I'm talking about, which is that in order for a therapeutic relationship to be a space of healing, I am challenged to be as genuine as I can. Because without that, it's really, really hard to have a space for healing. Being genuine doesn't mean it's not a goal or a destination. It's not a way of being that is permanent. It's remembering that my humanness precedes anything else that I do later in life. If I become a therapist, if I become a doctor, if I become a lawyer, whatever it might be, my profession is not who I am. My humanness precedes any other achievement. And if we don't forget that, and we allow ourselves to be vulnerable with the other, there is a uniqueness of space that is hard to quantify and put into words. But it's the essence of the beauty of Gestalt therapy. We're one of the few theories that the principle of the work, it's the relational space. It's not how we do it. And we get lost sometimes in this. It's not about the how. It's about the what. And that essence of connectiveness. The other stuff that we learn to do, all the fancy techniques and things, they're wonderful. They're great. For our clients, they're irrelevant. They have no idea. The only reason they're willing to try things out and experiments and all the stuff that we learned to do is because there's enough safety in our relationship that they can trust us to do whatever it might be, to stand up and take a posture or to talk to an empty chair. I don't do empty chair anymore, but that's a whole different lecture. But to have this exploration, the way they're willing to is because there's enough relational space there. I want to say a couple of things about relationships real quickly. And I want to thank you, all of you, for your comments, and Carolina for taking a moment and checking in with me. That means a lot. That really does. I do feel very seen and supported by all of you and by you. So I appreciate that deeply, that you took some time to check in with me. And that's the unquantifiable concept of relationships. When we think about relationship, the concept of relationship, most of us can think about what that means, have a concept, have an essence of what the word relationship means. The closest, metaphor for it, for me, it's ocean waves. So if I say, think about a wave, every single one of you will have an image of a wave. But if we were to describe it, it will be different. It might be big, it might be small. The water might be crystal clear or dark blue. It might be massive. It might have a lot of foam. It might be crashing into rocks. It might be a soft wave landing in the sand. The sand might be light or dark. But we all can immediately have a concept of a wave. Here's the thing about a wave. It never stays the same. Once it ends and it is reformed again, it changes. It's in constant change. The way that it relates, and it's made out of water and some sand or rocks or whatever, where it's scratching, in order for the wave to have an ending, it has to finish in some way. And then it starts again. And it's always moving, always shifting. That is the best example of what a relationship is. It's not something that can be defined in just a moment. It is ever changing and adapting and moving, even though I can conceptualize it. If I don't move with it, if I don't allow it to be something that flows and comes and goes, I run the risk of, instead of seeing the ocean, seeing a picture of it. Not to say the picture of the ocean or a wave cannot be beautiful, but it does not replace the never-ending movement and crashing and beauty of a life ocean. So when we think about relationships, it's the ever-changing nature of them that makes it special. And that is what creates an opportunity for healing to happen and for trauma to be explored with the purpose of making space for the unexpressed pain. Trauma lives in the unspoken. And one of the most commonly unspoken traumas are the loss of home in order to survive. Coming back to our migration stories, whatever that might be. If I left somewhere for a better place that it's safer, that is the story. But the pain of the loss of what was left behind. And this could be not just a migration to another country, just a moving on with life, endings, passing on to the next thing, choosing to do something different in my life. There is grief and loss that when it's not expressed and all I'm supposed to look at is the benefits of change, that we're missing out on a full human experience. So even sobriety, it's a loss. Because I'm losing that relationship with whatever compulsive behavior was helping me live. Ending an unhealthy relationship is a loss. So if we could just slow down enough to make space for human pain and loss to be shared, there's so much that can happen in that space. There's so much acknowledgement of the realness of life. So I want to take a moment and just see if there's anything coming up for, like, I said I was not going to talk nonstop for 45 minutes, and I'm almost there. So I want to take a moment and just see any thoughts, questions.
You absolutely haven't talked out as Rafael. Quite the opposite. Just to time check, we've got 10 minutes, so it's up to you how much more content and how much space you want to leave for questions coming.
Yes, thank you. I do want to use the time that we have left to see what's coming up for the group, questions, thoughts, anything that resonates. I want to use the last 10 minutes together to be with you instead of just me sharing. There's no requirement or expectation, but I want to invite you if there's something that's coming up for you to share it.
I just wanted to say that for me, is just thank you so much for this. I'm so moved. I feel so moved. I feel like my heart is like boom, 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 boom. And to be honest, at the beginning of your lecture, I was a bit like, like kind of tired and getting a bit bored. And I ignored you for the first, I don't know, 5, and then something just sparked my energy again. And I feel I'm so like, at the moment, I feel so moved. There are just, those things that people keep on repeating. And there is just so little of something that is really truly new and creative, or even, like something to reflect on these days. Like, I feel like there is a lot of spitting out the same thing. And here I am just sitting and really hearing some things that really, really touch me. And I'm just grateful for this. And like you say, even the unhealthy relationship is a loss. It feels like, oh, like I thought it's a success, living healthy relationship, I would consider it as a success. Now you're saying it is a loss. It is a loss. And I don't think that I acknowledge the fact that maybe, that's something important for me to look at that from that perspective, that it is actually a loss. Sobriety is a loss. I mean, this again is something that I wouldn't really think about that way. So thank you. And yeah, and also when you talk about pain, that can be the most intimate experience. Again, sounds so obvious, but you know, somehow I would not attach intimacy that much to pain. But actually, you're right. It's like it can be such an intimate experience if shared in a
Yes.
safe. And of course, I'm a therapist. I would hope people have that experience with me. But somehow I didn't really. I don't know what it was like. How you formed it. Yeah, the pain can be the most intimate experience, just like love, sharing love, or I don't know, somehow it really speaks to me right now. And I see how in my story I have attached to my family through painful stories. And when there was yet another painful story in my family and there was no ground and safety to be held, I migrated actually. And now just I got other puzzle to my story where I realized, oh my God, I'm just like, okay, so I am away. I live abroad. I'm originally from Poland, but I live in Scotland. And I'm like, okay, I see how something happened in my family and there was no ground to share it, no safety. And I thought I'm just going away for adventures. But actually, I also feel that it was because I didn't have space to process it. And I became Gestalt therapist to find space to process my pain. Good.
Yes.
It's crazy what's happening here, but yeah, that's my revelation.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. You're saying something that is so important. The hope of therapy is to expand, not to choose one or the other, right? So there is the joy of migration and exploring, and there is the loss and the grief and the pain of that. So it's all of it, and the challenge is, you know, when we talk about, we use this concept making space, right? And at least I used it a lot. And sometimes I remember I was talking to a client, and it was beautiful because I said, you know, part of the challenge is, can you make enough space for your human experiences? He said, what the fuck does that mean? Which is the perfect answer to my statement that was so technical. So what that means is that can I expand to include more? And in that expanding, I could see my pain and I could see my joy. I could see the beauty of the adventure and the loss of losing home. And one doesn't have to, you know, replace the other. And that's the challenge and the beauty of it, to expand. Lynn Jacob has this example that I heard her talk about once, where if you see, you know, our clients' human experiences, what they're able to see, and we have our own version of that. And when we meet with someone, we might have a little bit of shared space that in our stories and the way that we see the world. But there's so much of us and so much of the client that we don't know, that we don't understand. Actually, might be completely opposite to my value system. So part of the challenge is, can I expand to include more of them? Can I take in more, even if it's opposite to my beliefs or what I like? And in doing that, I'm expanding their space as well. And hopefully they could give a little. So now we have so much space to work with. All this common space that's right here, it's so much more than this space. So in creating space, it means my willingness to expand and be vulnerable and take in pain and sit with pain, knowing that this is special and beautiful. Now, it sucks. It's not pleasant, but there's beauty in pain. I think a lot about pain.
I think what stayed with me is, well, a few things. You said that this is how I heard it, is as important as the I do. And there is something around it where I find some of the teachers that I had were so focused on the I, though, that the I, it was somehow missed or misplaced, or I don't know what happened to it. And then you said trauma lives in the unspoken. And that touched me, because I am connected to something else which you also said, which was about if you can allow the pain and sit with the pain, you make space, right? And I can connect that with my experience with my clients, where if I allow their pain and I can sit with it, sometimes I become so empathical about it, I lose the differentiation between me and them, but that actually allows me to connect to some of my things that I can then take to my therapy or my supervision or whatever, that expands me as a therapist and me as a person. So that's what happened with me, for example, with one of my clients who has loads of trauma, and I kind of didn't think about my childhood as being traumatic. And then she said something and it really hit me, and then I've realized that this is the unspoken bit, that trauma lives in the unspoken. My experience that has always been unspoken is my experience as a neurodiverse person, which nobody ever spoke about. And it was like, oh yeah, you have ADHD and you have dyslexia, just move on with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You deal with it. You sort it out. Yeah, we know it exists, but and back in Poland when I was a child, this wasn't a thing, or it was seen as something completely different. So for me, like, my part of my journey right now is talking about that trauma that happened to me and how that impacted me and how that still stays with me. And I've met like that when I stayed with my clients and her pain of her childhood trauma, which is different to mine, but that was the connection, or that was the expansion.
Beautiful.
What I wanted to say.
Thank you for sharing that. I see Didri Winter has a hand up. Maybe that could be the last one.
Hi, Rafael. I'm sorry I can't put my camera on, so you can't see me, but luckily you know what I look like.
Yes, I was
even
so
though
happy
we've
to
never
see your
met
name.
in person. This is the first time we've connected in this way, and we've been on the business level otherwise. So I'm quite moved, and I'm very moved by what you shared about Irv. I didn't know you knew him so well, and it affects us all. I mean, most of us Gestalt therapists know who Irv was and what he meant to us, and what he brought to Gestalt therapy. So I'm so sorry you're feeling that so personally.
Thank you.
Thank you. And what I wanted to say was that, I mean, many things have what's the word? I'm having difficulty with words now because of being moved, but the question of loss, working with, as I've worked with her over 30 years with traumatized refugees, people, some of them are more traumatized in what the violence that's been done to them, some of them more in the grief of what they've left behind, or altogether. The importance, you've been talking about space, and when I think about space, there can be space if I'm on my own with my trauma, but if there's nobody there to receive what I'm wanting to connect about, and not being able to find words for, because there are none, because it's just so awful. The importance of the therapist is the only person who is willing to try and listen and be there, be with. That is just the most important thing. And that came over to me in how you're describing the importance of the therapeutic relationship. So thanks.
Thank you, Deidre. Yes, I appreciate your words. And, I know we're up on time, but one of the things that Martin Buber said that is, for me, one of the most important, and in the context of all the brilliant things he said is not talked about, is that healing happens in relationship. He said that all those years ago, that healing happens in connection with another human. And I think that's a beautiful statement. So I know, but time's up and you have other people coming up. So I just want to thank everybody for the time. I'm going to put my email here in the chat, because one of the beautiful things about doing this is that I love connecting with people. If you have any thoughts, questions, anything you want to reach out to me, please do so. Real quickly, I'm going to do a super quick shameless plug. We have a new online training starting today. That's where I'm going right now. So if anybody's interested, just send me a text, send me an email, sorry. You could join a module late because they're all recorded. That's it. No more commercials. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here. I hopefully will be in Poland with Carolina as well in June. If you want to come join us in person for a training on a weekend training, I'm sure you'll share that information later on. But and hopefully we'll see all of you in some Gestalt circle somewhere sometime. So don't hesitate to come over and say hi.
Thank you so much, Rafael.
Thank you. Bye.
Dziękujemy bardzo.
Thank you very much.